All right, and welcome back, everybody. My name is Nick. This is Swiftful Thinking, of course, and we are back here in the SwiftUI Bootcamp playlist. This is the original playlist that I put out on my channel about 2 years ago now, and since then, there's been a lot of updates to SwiftUI, and I thought it was a good time to now revisit this playlist and append a couple of videos here of maybe some of the new features that I've not yet covered. So I know iOS 16 came out about a year ago now, but there's some really cool features in there that I really want to share with you guys. I'm going to do that in the next couple of videos. There's also been a couple of things that I've now deprecated since I originally made this playlist. I've gotten a lot of comments on this has been deprecated, what's the new version? And so I'm also going to add on a couple of videos here on showing you the new way for some of those things that have been deprecated. I'll show you guys the new way to do that. And in those videos, I'm also going to talk a little bit about why those things have been deprecated, because it's not that Apple just wants to change their API, it's that they're making SwiftUI better. So anything that has been deprecated, it's deprecated not because it doesn't really work anymore, but because there's a new and better way to do it. And so that's what we're going to dive into in the next couple of videos. This video, as you already know though, is the NavigationStack video. So probably the biggest improvement from iOS 16 is the NavigationStack. Prior to iOS 16, we had the navigation view, which still works in our code. But if we are building SwiftUI apps now and we can support iOS 16 or above, we should be using a navigation stack over a navigation view. I'm going to explain in this video, firstly, obviously, how to use it, but I'm also going to explain some of the benefits of the stack over the view. And I'm not kidding when I say that it is incredibly powerful. The navigation stack opens us up to so many more features that we didn't previously have. So I am super excited to share this with you guys. I apologize that I have not covered this sooner. There's just been a lot of other videos, Firebase videos that I wanted to get through. But if you have not learned how to use it yet, I hope this video helps somebody. I'm using NavigationStack in all of my apps at this point. It is awesome. Let's check it out. Welcome back, everyone. It has been a while since I've added to this playlist. I am pretty excited. Most of the stuff that I've covered in this playlist is still relevant today, although Apple has made some pretty major updates in iOS 16. I'm sure they're going to make even bigger updates in iOS 17, and I'm a little late to the game for 16, but I do want to still cover them. So earlier in this playlist, we covered the Navigation View Bootcamp, and the Navigation View still works. But if you are building your app for iOS 16 or above, you should basically use NavigationStack instead of Navigation View. NavigationStack is the new version. Navigation View is now deprecated. And I'm going to show you in this video how to use NavigationStack. And I'm also going to highlight some of the changes that make NavigationStack actually better than Navigation View. Now, I'm still using Navigation View in a lot of my own apps. I don't think it's going to be a problem that it's in your app for at least the foreseeable future. But if you can use NavigationStack, I would definitely switch it over. Again, I'm back here in the Swiftful Thinking Bootcamp, the original bootcamp on this channel. And I'm going to right-click the navigator, create a new file. It will be a SwiftUI view, and let's call this one NavigationStack Bootcamp. Go ahead and click Create. Once we're inside, let's get that preview working. All right, we are going to delete this text and let's add a navigation view, the old navigation view that we learned in an earlier video in this playlist. And we can see that navigation view will be deprecated in a future version of iOS. So this is Apple telling us that you can still use navigation view, but it's going to be deprecated. So there will be a point of time in the future where you won't be allowed to use it anymore, although it probably won't be for a very long time, because Apple doesn't want to break the apps that are in the App Store today, so they are probably going to keep it usable at least for the foreseeable future. Regardless, we should update to NavigationStack as soon as possible. There also is a navigation split view, but I'm not going to cover that. I have actually never used it. I think it's more common on like iPads and larger devices. But NavigationStack has a lot to offer and is what I'm using in pretty much all of my apps right now. But NavigationStack is the go-to and probably the one that you should be using in most, if not all, of your apps. But we're going to start right now with the navigation view and look at how it's set up before we get to the navigation stack. So navigation view puts us into a navigation hierarchy. And then once we're in that hierarchy, we can add some text here. Let's say hello world.
And because we're in the navigation hierarchy, we can add that navigation title and say maybe Nav Bootcamp. Right, and so we can't get this navigation title, we can't get the nav bar at the top unless we're in a navigation view. This should not be new to you guys if you followed this playlist. We've been using this in many videos already. So when we're in a navigation view, in order to push to the next screen, we use a navigation link. So I'm going to add one here real quick. So I'll say navigation link, open the parentheses. I'm going to go with the destination and label completion here. The destination, let's just say screen 2. And the label, let's just say text that says maybe click me. All right, so we got it on our screen here. If I click it, it pushes to the next screen and we can go backwards. This is our standard behavior. And before we move forward, I want to talk a little bit about some of the limitations that are in this current setup here. So first and foremost, this navigation link allows us to push forward one screen and one screen only. So I can go to the next screen, but I can't go to screen 3, 4. I can't push multiple screens at the same time. NavigationStack, we're going to be allowed to do that. The probably bigger and more important thing that NavigationStack allows us to do is have basically lazy loading on these secondary screens. So some of you might not understand what lazy loading is, so I'm going to just do a quick example of this. So first I'm going to create a struct for the second screen that is currently screen 2. I'm just going to create another struct that says my second screen. It'll be a view, and we'll open the brackets. Every view needs a body, and let's just put text screen 2 in here. And actually, let's pass in a integer. We'll say value of type int. And I'm going to, just for now, I'm going to create a custom initializer here. And inside this initializer, I'm just going to print out the screen that is being initialized. So I'm going to print out init for screen, and then let's just pass in the value. So this should print out init screen 1, 2, 3, etc. And we'll just put that value on the screen, just so we know we're going to the right screen. All right, so if I put in here my second screen with a value of 1, and I click this, it goes to my screen 1. And let's real quick do a for each, and we're going to do a for each loop. So let's do 0 to maybe less than 10 of these, and this will be x. And I'm just going to put the navigation link inside. So here we're going to create a very simple loop here on 10 items, each with a navigation link. And this way, each of those items, we will go to the X screen. So let's render this real quick. Let me stop the preview. Let me just start it up again. And they're not loading because we are not in a VStack. Do a VStack here. Actually, let's do a scroll view followed by a VStack. And here we go. All right, add some spacing of maybe 40. All right, so I got all these buttons here. Click me. I should put click me with the X here. Oh man, getting sloppy, Nick. All right, click me 0 goes to 0. Click me 6 goes to 6. This is standard behavior. What I'm going to do now is take this and make this the first screen in my app. All right, and I'm going to build and run this to the simulator. And before I even click anything, I'm just going to look at what prints out to my console. And I can see here that we have the init for all of these screens already created. So I haven't clicked any of these yet, but the initializer for screen 7, 8, 9 has already ran. Now it ran twice for each of these, and I'm not concerned that it ran twice because that's just how the view renders. But what I am concerned about is the fact that I'm only on this screen, and yet all 9 of these screens have been rendered in the background. If you followed my crypto app, or if you've been building any apps pretty much prior to iOS 16, you probably ran into this problem because these navigation links are not lazy. And so if we had a lot of, maybe this second screen here was like a big heavy lifting screen, if that had a lot of like download functions or loading functions, we're literally loading 9 extra screens behind the scenes right now. And you can imagine on a larger app, right, this could actually slow down the entire app tremendously. We only want to load the screens and the things that we need to load when we need to load them. And so one of the major benefits of moving to a navigation stack is the ability to do this in a lazy fashion so that we only load the screen when we go to it. And now let's actually jump in and look at the navigation stack. So to use a navigation stack is actually quite simple. All we need to do is use a navigation stack instead of a navigation view. And we can actually still use these navigation links as is. And it looks like a navigation stack is only available on iOS 16. I'm just going to make my whole project only compile for iOS 16 now, just because this is a bootcamp. And here we go. Let's put this on the simulator again, and we should see that it still works. Awesome. I'm going to build and run this to the simulator again, and we do still have this initializer problem because, again, these navigation links are not lazy. But it is good to know that at least that as we start upgrading our app, we can still use this existing setup without needing to refactor everything right now, right? So if you have this in your app, you can keep that code as is, and you can just change the navigation stack and gradually start shifting your navigation links to navigation destinations. All right, so firstly, I'm just going to move the navigation title down here because I don't really want to work with it. And so, all right, Nick, show us what a navigation destination is. Well, it's just another modifier. We'll call navigation destination. And we're going to be working with the for destination completion here. I think this is much more common than the other one. And it's going to allow us to go to a destination view for a certain data type. Now, that data type is going to be pretty important. So I'm going to hold the option button and click enter here. Navigation destination for what type? Any type that conforms to the hashable protocol. Well, most types by default already conform to hashable. So if you're making your own model, you have to conform to hashable, but we right now are just using integers. So I'm just going to use integer.self. And again, self is referring to the type of integer, the type integer. Destination is basically where we want to go, and obviously we want to go to my second screen. So I'll click enter here. This hashable value is the selected value of this type. So if we say we're going to go to integer number 4, that's the number that's going to come through here. So I'm just going to call this the value, and then we'll just go to my second screen, and I'll pass in the value. And now what we're going to do is, instead of using this navigation link with a destination and a label, we're going to use just a very simple, we're just going to use a different initializer here, NavigationLink. We're going to look for the one with a value. Again, this value is hashable. This value, this corresponding value, is the same value that we are putting down here. So NavigationLink with a value. And what is the value of this navigation link? So when we click on this label, so it's going to be the click me, the value is going to be that X, right? The value that we are passing in. So we'll just put here X. That again, that X is an integer, right? So we're looking for integers down here. This all needs to line up with the same type. And the label, we'll just put this here. And let's let this compile real quick. So just a slight change to our code. It looks like it's the exact same in the UI here. If I click on 3, we go to 3. If I click on 7, we go to 7. But this time I'm going to build and run this to the simulator. And I'm going to open up the console here. And what do you know? Nothing is printed out to the console. So it looks the exact same, but behind the scenes, there's been a tremendous difference, right? We did not load all 9 of these screens already. So if I click on 4, it's going to load 4 at that time. If I click on 7, it's going to load 7 at that time. And just this by itself is enough for us to use NavigationStack over Navigation View. This is, I think, underratedly the biggest advancement to SwiftUI in iOS 16. This lazy loading of navigation is incredibly important for production level scalable apps. So if you're not doing this in your apps, I highly recommend this is like the first thing that probably should be refactored. And this is awesome, but of course there's way more that we can do with the navigation stack. So let's play around with this a little bit. Up here, I'm going to add a, let's just say maybe let fruits of type. It's going to be an array of string. And let's just add in apple. Let's add in orange. And let's add in everybody's favorite bananas without the S, because there's only one banana on this list. And this is an equal sign. And here we go. All right, so we got an array of fruits. Let's loop on these fruits as well. So I'm going to do it maybe, let's do it above these. Let's just put it here for each. Let's loop on the fruits. Fruits are not identifiable, but they are hashable. So we need to add in that ID so that we can tell it where the hash value is. The hash value is self, which is the string itself. And here we go. This will be each fruit. And what do we want to add here? I'm going to add in another navigation link. This time, again, I'm going to use the value label. Value, I'm going to put in the fruit. And the label, let's just put in text, fruit. Let's just put in text, and let's just add in the fruit. Why not? Let's refresh the canvas. We got apple, orange, banana on the screen, but if I click it, it's not going to go. Now, before I tell you guys exactly why, take a second, look at this code, and try to debug it yourself. Try to figure out why is the click me 1 to 9 are working perfectly, but the orange and banana are not. So pause it if you need to, but if not, I'm going to keep moving here. So the reason is because when we added a navigation destination, we told it look for values that are integers. And anytime you get an integer, go to this screen. But now these fruits are strings, right? So they're no longer integers. And so because they're strings, we actually need to add another navigation destination. What destination are we going to for strings? And so I'm just going to put down here, I don't think we need to create another second screen. I'm just going to put in some text that says another screen. And let's put in the value of the fruit. And of course, this is going to be a string. So it's really cool and kind of unexpected as a developer that we can actually stack these navigation destinations. We can literally have multiple destinations for multiple different data types. And this, again, it really helps us for scalable apps because you might have, a user profile model, you might have a post model, you might have a, settings screen. And so now we can really start to make our screens, our routing at least, dynamic here. So I added this string destination, and just like that, I can now go to the orange screen, the banana screen, and I can also go to the integer screens. So again, this is just a huge step up from the capabilities of the navigation view. All right, the last thing I'm going to do before we wrap up this video is talk about the path that we can bind to in a navigation stack. So when you build out a navigation stack, there actually is a path binding here. And we can see that the path is of type binding to a navigation path. Now, navigation path is a little misleading because a navigation path is pretty much anything that is hashable. So for example, down here, our navigation path is an integer. Here, our navigation path is a string. So it's a little confusing the first time you use it, but really it's just a binding, and then we have our closure. So I'm just going to delete this bit of code here and use this path. And what are we going to bind to? So let's create up here an @state private var. We'll call this stack path of type. And let's just do it with the strings for a second because we already have our fruit array. Let's just say bind to an array of string. And we'll set it equal to a blank array. I'm just going to bind to it with the money sign stack path. All right, and now it seems like we didn't add much code, but this did change the actual usage of our app pretty dramatically already. So this navigation stack, meaning the entire stack, is now set up to bind to destination values for strings. There's only strings in here. There are not integers in here. So even though we have the destination of an integer and we have the destination of a string, of course, this integer one is now broken because the path is overriding any of the other destinations. So if I click on orange, it's going to work because those are strings. If I click on number 4, it's now broken. And just to prove that, if I take out this path and I click on 4, it works. If I put the path back in and I click on 4, it's broken. So this is pretty good to know. It's not a bug, that's just how it works. But why would we want to do a stack path if it's going to limit us in that direction? Well, because when we bind to the stack path, we can now programmatically append to this path. So when we click on a string, it's actually just adding that string to this path. So if I click on banana, basically the stack path is going to be an array of one item that has a string of banana in it. But what I'm going to do up here is actually create my own button that says maybe super segue. And the action I'm going to call stack path dot append. And I'm going to append an element, let's just say maybe coconut. All right, so here I'm going to super segue and it binds to coconut. But why did I call it super segue? Because what we can actually do is append an array to this path. So I'm going to append contents of another array. And here I'm going to put in coconut. Let's do watermelon. And let's do maybe mango. So this is insanely cool now. We were not able to do this in iOS 15, but NavigationStack allows us to now push to multiple screens at the same time. So what this is going to append all three of these to the stack, basically pushing forward 3 screens at once. Super segue, I'm on mango. Mango is the third one. And so now when I click back, it's not going to go back to that original screen. It's going to first go to watermelon, then it's going to go to coconut, and then we're back. And so if you're just starting, you're building your basic apps, this is probably not a real use case that you're going to have very often. But larger scalable apps, bigger companies are going to need this setup. This allows you to push multiple screens at once into the path. And there are absolutely use cases where this is like a crucial part of some applications. So that is all I have for you guys for the navigation stack. There are ways to kind of override and customize this stack path so that it can accept multiple data types, but it's much more advanced, it's a little hackier, and I don't want to get into it in this playlist. So for right now, I think this covers pretty much all of your use cases for your beginner, intermediate level apps. Generally, I do not use the path unless I need to do this super segue basically. And most apps honestly don't need to do that, so I've been avoiding it. But if you have that binding there, you can then do that super segue. But one other cool thing that allows you to do is actually initialize the view with a preset binding if you wanted to. So you could do something like an on appear, or you could even just put it up here. You could just start with maybe, 1, 2, 3. And so as soon as this screen loads, it's actually starting on the third screen already. You can really get pretty customizable with this stuff. But that is it for me. Bottom line here is if you're using Navigation View, you can still use it, but get on a path to refactoring to the navigation stack. It's better, it's newer, it's more performant, and it's honestly easier to use. Because if you follow my crypto app, we did a lot of work to kind of create our own custom lazy navigation. And I'm not going to go and change that course right now. I think it's just like one screen that we really did that on. But this allows us to avoid all of that hackiness completely by just giving us lazy navigation destinations out of the box. All right, thank you guys for watching. As always, I'm Nick. This is Swiftful Thinking, and I'll see you in the next video.